What if the Revolutionary Army had joined the war at Marineford? With Dragon himself stepping into the chaos, how would the tide of battle shift and how would the entire world of One Piece change? The war at Marineford had erupted into chaos. Whitebeard arrived with his entire crew, making a thunderous entrance by triggering a massive tsunami, only for Kuzan to freeze it in its tracks. The Whitebeard pirates charged in, Marco soaring through the skies in blue flames, while commanders clashed with giants and vice admirals. From above the execution platform, Ace watched it all unfold with guilt and disbelief. Then came the shock. Luffy burst from the sky, leading a wild charge of impelled down escapees. His arrival lit the battlefield ablaze, and the war exploded to new heights. And then, something even more unexpected happened. The battlefield was chaotic when a horn suddenly rang through it. It was a deafening sound that made the Marines suddenly go on edge. Admiral Sengoku's brows furrowed. Everyone looked towards the sea, and that's when they saw it. A number of ships were coming close, and all of them bore the flag of the Revolutionary Army. No one expected this. Not the world government, not the Marines, and certainly not the pirates. The very organization that had haunted the dreams of kings and nobles across the seas had stepped out of the shadows and onto the most watched stage of the era. At the helm of the lead vessel stood a figure cloaked in storm gray robes. His face was calm, unreadable beneath the shadow of his hood, but his presence pierced the battlefield like a blade. Monkey D. Dragon, the most wanted man in the world, had arrived. The air grew heavier, the clouds darker, as if nature bowed before him. Behind him, standing tall with fierce determination in his eyes, was Sabo. Sabo was the one who had caused all of this in actuality. He had read the news about the execution that was coming up, and when he read Ace's name, he suddenly remembered everything from his childhood. Nights under the stars, stolen food shared between laughter, a bond forged in fire and brotherhood. His family was in trouble, and he had to act. He'd gone to Dragon with this, who was reluctant to participate in the war, but he realized that Sabo would have gone alone if he had to. He also realized that if he did go and the gamble paid off, then it would mean the Marines would suffer heavy losses. The decision was swift. He mobilized the commanders and readied the fleet to let the world know the revolution would no longer wait in the shadows. Koala and Hack led specialized assault units onto the battlefield and flanked the distracted Marines. Bilo Betty raised her flag, igniting the hearts of oppressed prisoners and pirate allies alike, empowering them to fight harder. Morley, the massive giant commander, burrowed beneath the battlefield, erupting from the ground with a bellow that sent soldiers flying. Lindbergh took to the skies, unleashing strange inventions that disrupted communication and scattered the Marine lines. And then, the true chaos began. Dragon stepped onto the battlefield, his presence warping the wind. Marines charged blindly, only to be swept away by gusts that felt like the wrath of the storm itself. He had an exceptionally intimidating aura, and lightning began to form in the sky. The man could control the weather, and then there was Sabo. He leaped off the ship and quickly began running towards the execution platform he could see in the distance. His pipe glinted in the sunlight, and his every movement was a blur. He fought like a man who had lost something once and vowed never to lose it again. Whitebeard's men were stunned at the arrival at first, but quickly realized that they were on the same side. Sengoku was doing his best to regain control, but the unexpected backup caused the entire balance of the war to shatter. For the first time since the Age of Roger, the world stood on the edge of a deeper abyss. What had begun as an execution had now spiraled into something far greater. Bilo Betty stood atop a collapsed Marine watchtower after her forces cut a path. She held her flag up as she shouted commands. With every wave of her banner, the oppressed and hesitant pirates and prisoners found courage, and their strength was increased by her power. They surged forward, overpowering forces that moments ago had them cornered. Morley himself was making a mess of the Marine lines and artillery with all the digging. Vista, the elegant swordsman, found himself fighting back-to-back with Karasu, the eerie, crow-like commander who clouded the battlefield in black feathers and confusion. Their styles couldn't have been more different, but they were working together quite well. Each of the commanders was working together. And then there was Dragon. He wasn't giving any orders like a normal commander would. Instead, he made his way towards Whitebeard. Storms seemed to gather where he stepped, and Marines were pushed back with the severe gusts of wind. When Kizaru tried to fire a beam of light his way, Dragon lifted his hand, and the shot veered wildly off course, dissipating harmlessly in the air. He finally reached Whitebeard. They didn't exchange any words, but the storm he created around them allowed the two to push forward. Whitebeard, chest heaving, grinned through his blood-stained mustache and smashed through the next wave of soldiers with newfound momentum. By this time, Luffy had already made his way through all the chaos. He fought away Garp before finally freeing Ace with some help, and the Whitebeard commander burst forward in flames. Sabo saw all of this from a distance. His pipe was now stained with grime and blood, but his eyes remained locked on the platform. The moment Luffy broke Ace's chains, a fire unlike any devil fruit sparked in Sabo's heart. He fought harder and faster. He wanted to get to his brothers as soon as possible since they were right in the middle of enemy territory. And Sabo was right to worry, as Sakazuki had reached the two before him. He hadn't been distracted by the revolutionaries. He hadn't flinched at the chaos. His focus remained razor sharp, his sense of justice burning hotter than ever. Ace was free, and in Sakazuki's mind, that was a sin that needed correction. He charged forward with magma erupting from his fists, carving a molten path toward the brothers. He provoked Ace and got him to fight, but Ace would soon realize realized that his devil fruit wasn't strong enough to keep up with the magma. His rage put Luffy in danger, and he saw that Sakazuki was going to drive his fist through his brother's chest. Ace rushed forward, his heart pounding as he came between Luffy and Sakazuki. Sakazuki's fist, blazing like the sun, aimed straight for his chest, but then he was lifted off his feet. Faster than the eye could see, Sabo had leapt in and taken both his brothers into his arms, carrying them away from the Admiral. He dropped them before quickly turning to face Sakazuki with bloodshot eyes. He clenched his fist as he stood between Sakazuki and his brothers. Sakazuki rose, his jaw clenched, fury radiating from him like lava. The ground beneath him cracked and hissed from where his punch had landed, and it was as if the air around him was burning. Sabo imbued Haki into his weapon. Then he moved like a blur. Sakazuki blocked the pipe as it crashed toward his head, but in an instant, Sabo swiped at his feet before spinning up into a devastating uppercut. He clenched his fingers and used his dragon claw to grab the Admiral's neck and fling him to the ground. Sakazuki retaliated with raw power, and his fist caught Sabo in the ribs, which he strengthened with armament Haki. It sent him flying, but he twisted midair, landed on his hands, and launched back into the fight. Magma clashed with steel, fists with fury. Each hit sent waves of heat and wind into the battlefield, drawing the eyes of both pirates and marines. Sabo was fast, clever, and precise, but against the raw elemental force of Sakazuki, he was beginning to falter. The magma-wielding Admiral's punches were getting stronger, and they were melting the ground whenever they landed. At one point, it was all Sabo could do to avoid them. Ace was the next to enter the battle as he began launching fireballs to distract the Admiral and give Sabo an edge. But the fight was still getting harder. Sabo's pipe clanged against a magma-coated fist. The pipe bent slightly. Sakazuki growled and brought down his arm like a falling meteor. Sabo leapt back, panting now, sweat streaming down his face, not from exhaustion, but from the heat. Sakazuki saw it too. With a furious roar, he surged forward, slamming a magma-covered fist into Sabo's side. The revolutionary flew across the execution platform, crashing into the base of a broken mast. Flames sizzled on his coat. He tried to stand again, teeth gritted. Luffy stood nearby, regaining his strength. He couldn't possibly deal with this Admiral who was pushing back both his brothers, and he didn't want to burden them either. Ace could have died, but then the world shook. Whitebeard had neared the two, and he slammed the Basento into the ground, causing Sakazuki to stumble. Whitebeard's eyes locked on Sakazuki as he leapt forward with a speed that shouldn't have been possible with his size. The Admiral barely turned before a seismic fist hit him in the face. With a single swing, Whitebeard warped the battlefield. Sakazuki was buried into the ground like a rag doll. Sabo struggled to rise, blood at the corner of his mouth. Whitebeard offered him a hand, and Sabo took it. Moments later, Dragon descended from the sky, wind spiraling behind him like wings. He landed beside the three brothers, the storm around him dying into stillness. His cloak whipped in the wind as he surveyed the battlefield. It was time. The signal for retreat went out. The Whitebeard pirates began falling back. The Revolutionary Army covered them, sweeping across the battlefield like a tide of liberation, cutting through what remained of marine resistance. Not all marines fell, but many did. Kizaru was proving to be the most annoying of the bunch. He was flashing across the battlefield, trying to pick off revolutionaries from behind, but his speed for once was not enough. Karasu's crows enveloped him, blinding his vision. Lindbergh suddenly appeared and unleashed a trap of electrified cannons just as Morley dug the ground out from under Kizaru's feet. He tried to escape, but Ivankov used a hell wink to send him down into the trap that had explosives. The blast was huge and even brighter than Kizaru himself. When the smoke cleared, his body lay there, broken. Blackbeard was watching the entire war from a distance since he was waiting for the perfect moment to attack Whitebeard and steal his devil fruit, but everything was falling apart. The Marines weren't able to defeat Whitebeard, and that meant Blackbeard couldn't get the Gura Gura no Mi, which was supposed to be the strongest Paramecia-type devil fruit in the world, all because of the revolutionaries. Seeing that, he decided that it was better to leave before anyone caught wind that he was here. And then, another ship appeared on the horizon with red sails. Shanks had arrived. He stepped onto the ruins of Marineford with his crew surrounding him, and all the parties on the battlefield became quiet. Whitebeard stood looking at him while leaning on his Basento, while Dragon himself was silent. The revolutionaries and pirates were ready for more, but the red-haired emperor raised a hand. He declared that a ceasefire would take place or he would personally intervene in this war. That was enough. No one wanted a prolonged war, and Sengoku knew that Shanks' participation would mean that the Marines would be no more. He gave the order for a ceasefire. The pirates withdrew, Ace leaning on Luffy's shoulder, Sabo close by. The revolutionaries moved in coordinated ranks, tending to their own, covering the retreat. Dragon was the last to leave, disappearing into the wind without a trace. On an isolated island, away from the reach of the world government, the victors regrouped. Whitebeard's ship sat anchored beside the revolutionaries' vessel, their flags billowing beside one another, pirate and rebel, united by blood and fire. There, among palm trees and salted waves, the three brothers sat together for the first time in over a decade, free, scarred, alive, and the world world, still reeling, would never forget the day the revolution came to Marineford. The island was quiet. It felt a bit unreal after all the bloodshed and chaos on Marineford. It was like this part of the world just hadn't been affected at all. Luffy, Ace, and Sabo had hugged each other tightly and were sitting under a tree near the port. Sabo told them about everything that had happened to him after the celestial dragon had attacked him all those years ago. Dragon had been the one to rescue him, and Sabo had woken up with no memory of his past. He had stayed with the Revolutionary Army since that time, but it wasn't until he read the news of Ace's execution that he suddenly remembered everything, including their promise. He had tears in his eyes and apologized to both Luffy and Ace for not remembering sooner. Ace stared at him, fists clenched. He didn't speak. He just stepped forward and pulled Sabo into a rough, almost painful hug. Luffy was there a second later, arms wrapped tight around both of them. They were just glad that they were safe and together, finally, after all these years. Meanwhile, a different kind of meeting was taking place in another portion of the island near the ships. Dragon and Whitebeard were talking about what had happened. Around them were commanders from both the Revolutionary Army and the Whitebeard pirates. Dragon declared that the world government wanted to make a spectacle of Ace to scare the world, but that move backfired and weakened them and their image significantly. He believed that with Whitebeard on their side, the two parties could topple the world government. Whitebeard then spoke and told Dragon that he had one foot in the grave already, and this war had significantly weakened him. He wouldn't prove as much of an asset as Dragon thought. Despite this, Whitebeard stood up and said that he still owed Dragon a favor for his support during the war, and that he would repay it. Dragon nodded, and the meeting was adjourned. Before they went their separate ways, the brothers promised to get stronger the next time they met. They had seen the power of an admiral up close, and they had also seen the power of an emperor up close. They would need to get much stronger to be effective in the new world. Luffy went back to Rusukena Island to train under Silver's Rayleigh. Ace focused on getting stronger, and the battles that followed, as the Whitebeard pirates kept their territory safe, allowed him to grow stronger, coupled with the fact that he began focusing more on his haki. Sabo himself redoubled his training. Over the next 2 years, the three did everything in their power to make sure that they could handle the most difficult situations. Meanwhile, the Marines had suffered heavy losses. Their recruitment was low, and there were many people who were defecting to the revolutionaries. The Revolutionary Army had grown from a quiet resistance to a thunderous force lurking beneath the waves of the world. The battle had not only shaken the foundation of the world government, but had lit a fire under the revolutionaries. Dragon, seeing firsthand how close they had come to permanently wounding the regime, began a slow but relentless campaign of infiltration, alliance building, and military buildup. Nations once too afraid to resist quietly began to show support for the cause. Disillusioned soldiers and Marines slipped away in the night, bringing with them knowledge, weaponry, and information. Former kings, dethroned or disgusted with the celestial dragons, whispered their allegiance in secret chambers. Pirates had a much stronger hold on the seas than before too, with no Marines to keep them in line. 2 years passed, after which Luffy had gone to quite a few places. The most noteworthy, though, was the entire battle in Wano. There, Luffy had faced Kaido and Big Mom, 2 emperors of the sea, and with his allies, he had defeated both of them and awakened his devil fruit into Gear 5. Monkey D. Luffy was now one of the 4 emperors, but his next stop, Egghead, changed a lot of things and revealed truths about the world government that they had gone to great lengths to keep hidden. Vegapunk asserted that the citizens deserved to know the fact that most of the landmass in the One Piece world was about to sink into the sea. He told them about the ancient weapons and about some bits and pieces of the Void Century and the Will of D. The fact that he had created the Mother Flame, which had been used to power an ancient weapon that destroyed Lelouch and ended up raising the sea levels even more. The truth came like a spark in dry grass. When Vegapunk's broadcast reached the world, it shattered the last illusions holding the world government together. Millions who had turned a blind eye could do so no longer. The truth had come, and it was uglier than anyone had imagined. For Dragon, the signal was clear. This was the moment they had been preparing for. Within hours of the transmission ending, orders went out across the seas. Revolutionary cells buried in kingdoms began to surface. Commanders like Karasu, Morley, Bilo Betty, and Lindbergh mobilized their troops. Ships were armed, supplies stocked. Dragon, at the center of it all, declared that what they had waited decades for, the final march to Mary Jawaz, would begin in a few months. Across the Grand Line and into the New World, messages flew. One of the first destinations, the Whitebeard pirates, Ace had grown significantly, and the Whitebeard pirates still retained most of their strength, despite the fact that Whitebeard seemed to only have some time left due to his sickness. Whitebeard would answer the call, considering everything that had happened. He would repay his debt to the Revolutionary Army, and Ace was glad to help his brother and the world. Meanwhile, far to the north, the skies of Elbaf were filled with thunder. The gods' knights, shaken by the collapse of their control, had begun launching preemptive strikes against kingdoms they feared might rebel. They were there to get hold of the giants, since they believed that they would be key in winning the war that was inevitably going to happen, and they had to make sure that the world government was the one that won. But things wouldn't go too well for them, as at the time, Luffy was there. Luffy had become close allies with the giants, and his entire crew was present when the immortal gods' knights had attacked. But Luffy had also become allies with the strongest giant, Loki, and the Pirate King's left-hand man, Scopper. Luffy led the charge against the invaders. The gods' knights met their match in the unrelenting ferocity of the giants and the fury of the Straw Hat Emperor. The gods' knights had taken the children hostage, but Luffy had helped free them. With that aside, the heroes ended up routing the gods' knights present on the island, one of whom was also the twin brother of Shanks, Shamrock. Shamrock had escaped, but the crew had figured out how to defeat them. The only way the regeneration could be bypassed was through high-level conquerors hockey, and luckily enough, the island had a few users: Scopper, Luffy, Loki, and Zoro. But the rest of the crew had been ill-equipped. Despite the fact that they had beaten the gods' knights, Luffy and Zoro would have to further hone their hockey if they intended to go up against them again, since they wouldn't always have Scopper and Loki to help out. Luckily though, Scopper offered to train them. Scopper had tested Luffy and Zoro back when they first met, and he saw a lot of similarities between them and Goldie Roger. Just like Rayleigh, he wanted to help the young emperor grow even more, and also because he knew that the final war was coming. Scopper took them under his wing and helped them hone their hockey for the next few months. As their training progressed, another familiar crew came to Elbaf. It was Shanks and the red-haired pirates. Shanks finally reunited properly with Luffy, and he saw how much the younger pirate in whom he had placed his hopes had grown. Shanks had heard of the Revolutionary Army's plans and knew that things were heading toward the endgame, and as the one who had once set Luffy on his path, he felt the weight of the coming storm. When he told Luffy of the war to come, of the armies converging on Mary Jawas, of the final battle to free the world from its chains, he didn't need to ask what Luffy would do. Luffy had decided he would help his brothers out in this war. Loki and Hadrudin were the first of the giants to instantly pledge to follow Luffy. The other giant warriors also agreed because of how Luffy had saved Elbaf, and because they had a bone to pick with the world government for daring to harm their children. Shanks grinned with pride at how many people were instantly willing to follow Luffy, and he decided that he would sail with him as well. The different groups began sailing from Mary Jawas. The Whitebeard pirates and their allies gathered. The Minks, the warriors from Wano, the giants of Elbaf, the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, and the Revolutionary Army. When the groups united near Mary Jawas, it was like more than half the people were there under Luffy's banner. That was how far the Emperor had spread his influence. The Celestial Dragons had sat atop the world for centuries, but now someone finally had the guts to stand up and rebel. And when the force finally reached, Whitebeard was the one who made their way. Using all of his remaining energy, Whitebeard leapt from the deck of his ship and used the might of his devil fruit to shatter the portion of the Red Line near Mary Jawas. It was an astonishing moment as everyone saw how powerful this man was, so far away from his prime. He could have destroyed the world if he were younger, but this was it. Whitebeard had done his job by giving the army a way to get to the Celestial Dragons. And then the war finally began. Revolutionaries hammered the perimeter defenses, while giants from Elbaf hurled massive boulders over the walls of Mary Jawas. The Marines fought back with desperation. The Pacifista armies were unleashed, Seraphim among them, and even Cypher Pole Zero joined the defense. Kingdoms that once bowed to the world government now stood against it. Alabasta, Dressrosa, Wano, and more. Their banners rising like flames in the wind. The groups assaulted Mary Jawas and broke through the first line of defense. The Gods' Knights had to step up. Luffy had already told everyone about the leader's weaknesses that the Gods' Knights had, and so the main forces of the Alliance stepped out as well. Ace had become an absolute beast. Sabo had mastered Conqueror's Haki. Luffy could defy the laws of physics with Gear 5. Shanks, Dragon, Zoro, Ben Beckman, Marco, Loki, and the others forced through the Gods' Knights, and they fell one after the other. Even Draculae Mihawk, the world's strongest swordsman, had come with the Cross Guild, believing that this would be a worthy fight beside Shanks. As the Gods' Knights went down, the Elders finally made their appearance. Their strength was on another level, but even they found a large task to deal with so many users of Conqueror's Haki. The fights were brutal, but it was clear who had the upper hand. Luffy in Gear 5 was an especially big menace to the Celestial Dragons, as his fighting was extremely unpredictable, and he kept warping the world around him. He bounced and stretched and spun through the battlefield in Gear 5, smiling as if the weight of the world was nothing on his shoulders. He clashed with an Elder, then another, spinning through their attacks, his form breaking the laws of reality itself. With each laugh and punch, he inspired everyone watching. He was joy, he was freedom, he was the sun. Saturn lunged at him first, monstrous and furious, but Luffy spun mid-air, his limbs twisting like a cyclone. He struck Saturn's spider-like form with a punch so heavy, it cracked the ground beneath him. Saturn roared, venom spilling from his fangs, but Luffy twisted reality again, slipping past him like light through mist as Shanks took over. Zoro intercepted Nusjuro, blades clashing in a thunderstorm of sparks, while Mihawk parried Warkery's steel hide, both masters moving faster than the eye could follow. Marco and Beckman struck together, overwhelming Jupiter's monstrous sandworm form with blue flames and bullets sharp as meteors. Emu stepped onto the battlefield. They wore a dark cloak, and their face was hidden behind a smooth, plain mask. Their presence alone made the air heavy. Ace didn't hesitate. He roared forward, his whole body wrapped in white-hot fire. He swung his fist, sending a massive wall of flame straight at Emu. Emu moved fast, slicing through the fire with a single clean motion. The ground under their feet cracked from the force. Sabo joined in. He came from the side, aiming for Emu's ribs. Emu blocked with black tendrils, sparks flying as Haki clashed against them. For a second, Sabo slid back, digging trenches into the ground, but Ace was already behind him, hurling another fire blast. Luffy came from above, bouncing in the air, twisting his body like a slingshot. His fist grew massive, coated in white steam, and smashed into Emu's. The impact sent a shockwave across the battlefield, knocking broken pillars and weapons into the air. Emu didn't fall back easily. easily. Luffy laughed, twisting through the chaos. His body bent unnaturally as he rebounded off the ground, sending his foot slamming into Imu's side. Ace and Sabo pressed the attack. Ace's fire grew even hotter, turning blue at the edges, while Sabo's fists shone with blazing Conqueror's haki. Together, they launched a two-sided assault. Ace hammering from the front, Sabo sweeping from the side. Luffy didn't let up. He stretched his arms wide, grabbed two broken towers from the sides of the battlefield, and slingshotted himself like a missile, smashing both feet into Imu's face. This time, Imu crashed into the ground, dust and broken rock flying up around them. Breathing heavy, Imu stood up again. All three grinned and moved at once. Ace's flames exploded forward as Sabo charged right behind them. Masses of abyss were being flung towards them, but then Luffy leapt in and drove them down, bending them to his will. They trapped Imu between them. Luffy hit first, an uppercut to the chin which sent Imu spinning. Sabo caught them midair with a brutal punch to the ribs. Ace finished it, slamming Imu back down with a burning, giant-sized fist that created a crater where the throne once stood. The elders and God's knights remaining were trying their best to reach the king, but the rest of the alliance forces kept them from interfering in the fight. As Imu stood up once again, the three brothers unleashed every ounce of Conqueror's haki they could manage and landed a final blow together. And then there was silence. The monster began to dissipate, and with it, so did the elders. The God's knights dropped their weapons as their immortality faded as well. The silence that followed was not peace. It was disbelief. But then came the roar. A cheer rose from the battlefield as the flags of the celestial dragons burned. Mary Joie's once untouchable now lay in ruin. The throne was empty. The war was won. The revolution had succeeded. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more One Piece videos.